Oh, there we go. We are recording, which is exciting stuff. So you actually all registrants will receive a link, so they'll be able to look back at this at their leisure. Also, I will remind you, as we always do, we'd love to get your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll bring those questions and comments to the folks on our panel today. So join us there and interact. Best way to put the questions out there. It is now officially 11 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And everyone who comes to Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network events knows I do this introduction, so they all come like moments after the introduction is over. I think they're like timing it just so they love it, but they've just heard it a few times. So again, welcome. It's 11 o'clock. My name is Alan Reed. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network, and I thank you for being part of our virtual events. The good news is we only have a few more virtual events on the horizon, and then we are switching back to in-person in January. We have an incredible 2022 planned, and as long as none of these crazy variants or Delta Plus or all that kind of stuff come, we're looking forward to seeing you in person. And of course, we'll keep a hybrid presence. Next slide. For those of you who don't know Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network, we are a mission-driven industry organization. We bring together the incredible power of the food and beverage industry in the greater Chicagoland area. That is 4,500 companies and 130,000 people. Our job is to grow the industry, drive innovation, grow the local economy, and create jobs. We are proud to have 125 corporate members and always looking for more. If you're interested in becoming a member, don't hesitate to reach out, or you can take a look at our website. The link is listed here. And speaking of our members, we can't live without them. We love them. Like we're gonna let this one just roll because it's a little bit fast, but terrific folks. We can't do what we do without the support of these incredible members. We do have a brand new member, McCain Foods, who we welcome heartily. Next slide. Also, you may have heard of our sister organization called Bigger Table. Bigger Table brings together that same food and beverage industry of the greater Chicagoland area to address very specific issues to our local communities and to give back. Specifically, we're addressing food insecurity, unemployment, and inclusive economic development. These are all important every day. They are even more important in the midst of a global pandemic. And we are proud to say that we distributed, 40,000 chocolate almond protein bars to the Central Illinois Food Bank last week. And we have about 130,000 that'll be distributed to the local Chicagoland area food banks between now and the end of the year. These are great products, delicious, and taking us in a new direction. We've never done bars before, but we had incredible donations from folks like ADM, Glanbia, Blommer Chocolate, Olam Ingredients, a whole all-star list. So more to come on all of that, and watch our press. We love to start the conversation here and take it into social media, especially those of you watching via LinkedIn Live. Feel free to put your comments in there and we will interact, bring questions in here, and can keep the conversation going. Next slide. We have just 2 more events for a very busy 2022 after this one. Building and Protecting Your Brand is on Thursday. Don't miss it. It does star the lovely and talented Dennis Ryan, who will be opening up sort of the vault of his significant knowledge around how to build powerful brands, but also how to protect them. And we're looking forward to December 7th, our last event of the year. We're calling it 2021 and Beyond, a year of trends. It's been a crazy year. We want to look back at those trends, and you're going to get to sample. We have an incredible sampling box. You register, you get a sampling box, and then you get to see how all these incredible startups with amazing products are delivering on the trends that you're going to see some of which we saw in 2021, but you're going to see in 2022 and beyond. Really, really cool and a great way to end the year. With that, I am going to turn it over to Nick and Dennis to run this crazy show.
Terrific. Thanks, Alan. I'm Dennis Ryan of Beta Rutter Chicago, and we're here with another one of our Intel Distillery quarterly distillation recaps. Now, our team will fill you in on everything you need to know about what's trending in food, beverage, and agriculture. And then we're going to be joined by a special guest, Adam Hardie, who is Danone North America's agricultural sourcing senior manager. So he's going to discuss some of the benefits that innovations in regenerative farming are bringing to the entire food supply chain. So that should be very interesting. If you are a subscriber to the Intel Distillery, you got this a little while ago. It was our latest quarterly, probably came out about a month ago now. But as we highlighted then, and we continue to see, brands continue defining their good very publicly. This has become the prominence of CSR and now ESG just continues to rise. In fact, since we published that report, a dozen more brands have announced sustainability commitments, including McDonald's, Burger King, Panera, Mars, Hormel, and Knorr, part of the Unilever brands. In fact, just today, we heard Kraft Heinz announce their plans to be carbon neutral by 2050. So this is just a really big thing. And it's the big part of it, it not only appeals to consumers, we're seeing how this trend is really focused on investors. It's all part of this latest innovation or the latest iteration. And what Kyle's showing you right now is that's in our quarterly report, this timeline. And really, if you go back, it kind of works like this, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, the golden days of when consumer packaged goods really started rising. We saw that standard corporate governance, and this was defined by the Business Roundtable, was that shareholder value mattered above everything else. This is the time, the 70s, Milton Friedman, shareholder value was all that mattered. But then somewhere in between 1990 and 2010, in about 20 years, we started seeing single issues rise: cage-free eggs, the use of antibiotics, gestation stalls. And activists really started pushing these issues, and companies started responding with kind of one-off commitments. But then around the 2010, they started shifting towards larger corporate statements, more inclusive, multiple point statements. And then just recently in 2019, the Business Roundtable updated the responsibilities that they believe corporations have to go beyond shareholders to talk about consumers, the environment, communities, workers. So all of this now, as we've just seen CSR, we're now ESG, just keep evolving. And like I said, right up to Kraft Heinz today, making their announcement. And that's just something we're going to continue to watch. And something I think is just more and more a part of just doing business in the food supply chain. So with that, let's turn it over to Nick, who will begin taking us through this quarterly update. Nick?
Hey, thanks a lot, Dennis. And yeah, that's kind of the theme of a lot of how a lot of the policy is evidencing itself, or how the climate, the corporate climate is evidencing themselves through corporate announcements, people addressing things depicted in this chart here. So this is what we call the spaghetti chart. It's based on our team systematically counting words by and about the top 1,500 voices in food and agriculture. So that's just our system of trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing and what some of the biggest macro topics are. So here, the latest quarter, you know, the weather, stewardship, protein, hunger, those are some of the top issues that are talked about throughout food, beverage, and agriculture. And what I'm going to talk about right now is just what we're calling the trifecta, which is the weather, stewardship, and climate change, all kind of working in tandem, being addressed. These are issues that are separate from the pandemic, that are driving that kind of macro corporate policy timeline that Dennis spoke about. So looking at the weather, it's usually the number one topic in quarter three. So this rhymes with what we've been analyzing for the past several years. So in the past, for 4 of the past 5 years, the weather has been the number one topic. That's driven by the harvest and also harsh weather, things like, hurricanes and drought and stuff like that coming through in Q3. But this year particularly, drought in the Western United States was a huge factor, with 99% of the Western United States affected. But then since then, I mean, probably since the close of this report, ironically or comparatively, there's a deluge of rain throughout the Northwest. So the weather is just a huge part of the food supply story. Hurricane Ida late in August disrupted the eastern part of the country too, from New Orleans all the way up to New England, complicating what's already a halfway broken supply chain because of the pandemic. So these things conspiring, made the weather the number one topic. So stewardship as our number two topic, that's what we talk about: land stewardship and farms and food producers doing what they can to conserve natural resources of air, water, and land. There's a lot of corporate policy coming out, and this is how they might work in tandem. Like out west, the drought causing the Colorado River to dry up, which is a water source for so much agriculture out that way, had record lows, forcing farm operations there, mostly in things like nuts and produce, to consider even not planting. So that just has huge ramifications on prices and supply chain and trucking and all that stuff. Another major topic, within the stewardship fold would be the UN Food Systems Summit in September. So for the very first time, corporate leadership and national leadership, international leadership came together to talk about these things all together. So climate, stewardship, food security, and nutrition policy. So all of those things coming together for one of the first times on an international stage caused tons of conversations that we were really interested in. So ahead of that, going along with the theme here, many corporations, announced policies ahead of this, things like PepsiCo being water positive, net water positive within the next 10 years. Barry Callebaut, the chocolate company, announcing their feed choice for dairy cows might be a way to mitigate CO2 emissions. And then for the first time, the industry group, the National Chicken Council, published its first ever, holistic sustainability report. So those are the conversations contributing to the stewardship conversation. And finally, the third part of the trifecta here, climate as a separate topic here. So obvious overlap with that UN Food Systems Summit, which was interesting, just from a pure climate policy perspective. This was a large topic, as I said, from a government and corporate perspective, but there's also a pretty activist angle to this, with lots of high profile criticism of this summit for not addressing pandemic induced issues. So the UN itself hired a special rapporteur, that's EUR, Michael Fakhri, who wrote in the report that this came from within, that the criticism was how and why the world's food systems undermine human rights, inequalities, and threaten biodiversity, contributing to the climate change. So that was, while industry groups and corporations were, very supportive of the summit, it was hard for us, monitoring the whole food system, to ignore some of the criticisms. But, after the summit, running along with the theme, big companies like ADM, Bayer, RBI, which is Burger King and Tim Hortons, and JBS, all pledged the latest trend and themes would be just carbon neutrality by either 2030 or 2050. So, that was some of the good of it coming out of this. Lots of major commitments to climate and carbon neutrality. So that kind of runs through the very top end of our quarterly report. Melissa now is going to run through the topic of workers, which is also just a huge thread throughout, all of food. It's the foundation of the food production, from farms to processing right through to channels. So I'll turn it over to Melissa now.
Thanks, Nick. So if you've been paying any attention to the news, you'll know that workers are really pushing back against employers in record numbers. So they were deemed essential. Many of these workers stayed on the job during the pandemic, risking exposure to COVID while watching corporations profit. So the situation has led many to reflect on their jobs, with some deciding to change jobs and industries entirely, and others using the pandemic as leverage to fight for better pay and conditions in their current roles. So currently we are witnessing one of the biggest strike waves in a generation, leading many to give October a new nickname, Striketober. Some 17,400 workers went on strike in October, according to the Bloomberg Law Work Stoppage database. To put this in context, the previous 3 months averaged around 10,000 striking workers per month, according to Cornell University data. These striking workers say they are fighting for their future and they deserve better pay and benefits. So two of the major strikes that we're currently kind of following closely is the John Deere strike, which is 10,000 workers who've been striking for about 2 weeks. Just this past weekend, the workers union actually announced it had reached a tentative deal. So hopefully we'll see this one resolved soon. And then the other one would be the Kellogg's cereal plants. There's about 1,400 workers striking since about October 5th. And contract talks continue to be ongoing, and we'll see how this continues to move forward. Now, what's also exasperating the situation and empowering the striking workers is the ongoing worker shortage. So more than a year and a half into the pandemic, we're still missing around 4.3 million workers. Food service, especially small restaurants, have been hit the hardest by the worker shortage. These restaurants are adapting by cutting hours, raising employee pay, and then increasing menu prices, while larger establishments are getting a little bit more creative with how they're using the staff they currently have. So for example, last month, Raising Cane announced it was sending 50% of its corporate staff to assist short-staffed stores. But then there's a bigger problem as well in the restaurant industry, where workers are leaving entirely. So during the pandemic early on, plus in unemployment benefits, these workers had time to reflect and reevaluate their lives. So many have decided that the long hours and the low pay just aren't worth it and have turned to other skills for employment and a healthier work-life balance. Now, the retail sector is also been hit pretty hard by this worker shortage. And with the upcoming holiday season, a lot of these companies are looking for new ways to attract and retain employees. One of those ways has been wage increases. So just last week, Costco announced that employees would be receiving an additional $1 per hour for minimum wage. So that was the original minimum wage was $16 and it's going up to $17. And Target has announced for the holiday season a wage increase of $2 per hour. So we'll see if this will help with hiring in the retail sector. Holiday hiring forecast is pretty ambitious. So we're seeing from Walmart, they're aiming for about 150,000 associates to hire. Target is looking for 100,000 seasonal team members. Publix is looking for 30,000 new team members, and Kroger is in need of 20,000 seasonal employees. So we'll see really how this plays out as we get deeper into the holiday season. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who's going to talk about the supply chain issues.
Thank you, Melissa. So there is a common theme here between workers and supply chains. Most commonly, the vocabulary used around these topics, words like beleaguered, strained, shortage. We're just seeing a lot of hardship in making everything flow as it had before the pandemic. So shortages of workers mean that transportation is all disrupted. It's hard to get goods transported quickly. We're also seeing that different types of outputs are harder to come by. So skilled labor at a meat processing plant might mean that your favorite cut of meat is harder to find in a grocery store. That sort of effect is playing out across the supply chain. And part of the result is that food prices are going up, as well as input prices. So we're seeing that UN said there was a 1.2% rise in prices globally for food, which is about a 30% increase from this time last year. And then within the US alone, IRI tabulated about 6% increase for food. Meat has suffered much more than other categories, with about an 11% increase over the past year. And yet, despite all of these costs going up, one of just the interesting things we've seen is that a counterpoint is that kind of the alternative proteins have had their prices going down over time, and yet they still haven't picked up sales trends to the same degree, despite the difference in supply availability. Separately, we've also seen that some organic foods, particularly soybeans, have had some difficulty with prices. And certainly over the past quarter, wheat was a big deal, and barley as well. So some grains and key staple crops are struggling a lot, which in turn is hurting what big CPG companies can turn around for prices. They have to raise their prices of their products, and then in turn, you see more consumers having to pay more for food, and as well restaurants. So restaurants get also, and retail as well, getting hit on both sides in terms of what they're trying to sell is more expensive, but then also the people, their employees that are trying to help them sell it are harder to find. So in general, everything just keeps getting pushed further down the chain to increase prices. Another key point in this is that ports and international trade are also gummed up. So in addition to, say, trucking, needing more workers to help get goods from the ports to stores, we've also found that there's a big backlog of ships. The US's most busy port, Los Angeles, had about a 100 ship backup as of mid-October. Normally, there would be 0 or at most 1 ship waiting to be unloaded. So just the sheer quantity of goods that have been sitting in the water waiting to move out of the port has been an incredible backlog, and has certainly made a lot of the difficulty in supply chain logistics. Like that is a key point. So on October 13th, President Biden announced a 90-day sprint plan to help clear up the ports. And that included making the Port of Los Angeles a 24/7 operation, which to me was incredible that it wasn't already 24/7. But now we're finding that big retail chains like Walmart and Costco have begun chartering their own boats so that they can come and get the goods off of the boat during off hours and get that moving at a more efficient time. And so hopefully that will help clear things up, but not everyone within the industry has been overly hopeful, again, because of worker shortages. There are still more kinks to work out. And finally, despite all of these tight supply chain issues and trying to work through all of the growing pains here, we've also found that a lot of companies are trying to work in their CSR goals, their ESG goals. They want to build supply chain resilience in new ways. They want to also meet targets for UN goals and for what they perceive different consumers wanting to have in their goods. So we're seeing commitments to regenerative agriculture. We're seeing like General Mills issuing bonds to meet its sustainability targets. And again, greenhouse gas emission reduction. All of this is playing into how companies are deciding to move forward with their supply chains. And it's definitely creating a unique landscape that we'll be keeping an eye on. And on that note, I'll pass it over to Dennis and Adam.
Thanks, Kyle. Now we're just very happy to be joined by Adam Hardie. Again, he is Danone North America's Agricultural Sourcing Senior Manager. So he's a well-traveled guy who spends a lot of time out on the road and out in the field, and he sees all these innovations happening in the first step of the food supply chain, particularly regenerative farming. So welcome, Adam. Would love to hear what you've been seeing and the kind of trends you've been witnessing.
Certainly. Thank you. And good morning from Golden, Colorado, the world headquarters of my basement. Here we are. Thanks again, Nick and the team at Beta Rutter for the invitation today. Hugely appreciate it. I'm going to walk through a little bit of our world as it kind of surrounds a lot of the issues that the folks have just discussed. I say a little background on myself. I grew up on a dairy farm in central New York, where my parents still own and operate that dairy farm. Milk 1,400 cows, farm about 2,000 acres of crops that support and feed the cows. I worked for Cargill for about 6 years after college, and then hopped right in with Danone for the last 5 years, almost 4 years, excuse me. Working on our agricultural team, really focused on this kind of regenerative agriculture process, partnering with farmers and NGOs on kind of advancing our work in that area. So without further ado, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and let me know if you can see that okay. Okay, off we go. Well, again, I think this slide might be slightly outdated. I think we might not be the largest B Corp in the world anymore, but very recently we were, which was a big shift for the way we do business. Again, it really is a people, planet, and profit scenario, and that, again, how we operate, literally our business tactics are very much focused on this B Corp certification. I think it's also important to kind of bring up that our brand portfolio is pretty broad in terms of the dairy products we work with, anything from Horizon Organic to Dannon brand to the Wallaby Organic group. But we also have a lot of plant-based brands. And I think it's important to kind of start at the brand. I'll circle back to it again, I promise. Here's a big piece of this world that I think hasn't gone unnoticed by farmers and agriculture, is these kind of loose definitions around what regenerative agriculture means to a certain business. And where I think Danone has been very proactive in this space is defining that very clearly. So again, set of farming principles that protect soil, water, biodiversity, and respects animal welfare. This system acknowledges the key role of farmers and positive impact of farming while taking into account its economic viability, helping to restore the ecosystem, contribute and mitigate climate change, and ensures resilient agri-food systems for the next generations. Again, I hate reading off slides, but I think it's important to start there, because I think we have set our North Star very clearly and are working with our farming portfolio to do so. Here in the United States, we have a pretty interesting relationship, obviously, with the purchase of the White Wave business about 4 years ago. We expanded our direct farm contracts from about 12 dairy farms to over 600 dairy farms. So that's pretty interesting for a branded company to have that large of a footprint, all the way from the Northeast to the coast of California. And again, I think where we've started back in 2016 is an important starting point. So again, we at that time, it was just the Dannon company. It was not yet the formal Danone business, which included White Wave. We started with this aspiration to, improve sustainability, improve our farmers' livelihoods, and we really had no idea how we were going to get there. I'm not going to say I came on at that time, and then also, the world of Danone improved, but there's some correlation, I'd like to think. So again, we committed $6 million towards soil health research in 2018, and really what we did is we started bringing in the data from our farms and helping them understand their own data, right? With professional agronomists and very, very good data analysts. This became the cornerstone of everything that we do and how we make decisions going forward. So you can see kind of the growth here that we really are growing the program. This year, we're actually going to be up above 100,000 acres, which is pretty exciting. That includes not only dairy farm acres, but also some plant-based acres as well. And again, I kind of mentioned the cornerstone of this entire program being data collection. We leverage a group, sustainable environmental consultants. Their program is called Eco Practices, where again, we're able to bring in the farm's data. Anything from, Case IH or My John Deere, something, again, a data program sitting in the tractor that every time the tractor crosses the field, we collect how fast the tractor went, what type of tractor it was, what are they putting on the field, what type of tillage they're doing, at what depth. All of those pieces of data we are bringing in, verifying, and then we're able to make a decision that's again, non-emotional and very straightforward. So again, I wanted to kind of come back to the brand focus, right? While it's all well and good to make, and farmers are easily the best professionals when it comes to this. Farmers have been improving their sustainability efforts since the dawn of time. The MO has always been do more with less. And again, they've been pushing forever and really not kind of receiving the credit that they might be due. And so I'd say this is a very interesting time because we're able to tie the good actions our farmers are doing, verify the data that we've collected, and then tie it to the brand that you see on the shelves as consumers. So again, the Horizon brand is a very, very cool brand, a legacy brand here in the Danone world, and quite frankly, on the grocery store shelves. Very big commitment that's come out in the last few years is that we're aiming to be a carbon positive brand by the end of 2025. That's a tall order. Again, our global company, Danone, has the aspiration to cut our carbon footprint in half by 2030 and neutral by 2050, which is a similar cadence to a lot of other groups. But this is very big in that, one, milk is a very carbon intensive product to produce. And so to basically neutralize it and then go one more is a very, very difficult task. But again, one that we are earnestly taking on with our farmer partners. I say some small print here, but I think it's very important to understand that this portfolio of the Horizon brand sits in a couple different buckets when we talk about carbon, right? It's how we move the product to the plants. It's how we kind of enable carbon offsets at the end of the day and select that. And then really the focus and my focus has been on the farm side of things. Being a dairy farm guy with a background in dairy cattle nutrition, really our role is to work with the farmer on quality projects that again are verified by our data collection process to reduce the carbon footprint on the farm. And about 67% of our footprint for this brand sits on the farm, which is a pretty hefty footprint. Again, a nice website there that you can go to kind of dive into the infographics a little deeper. To be honest, as a farm kid, I want to get right to the farm projects because I think this is where the rubber meets the road. Is we can talk all day on webinars and in big conferences, but until we make actionable changes on the farm, we're not going to move the needle. So again, very proud that over the last 5 years, Danone has done a lot of work, quite frankly, internally to make it known that a farmer cannot commit to huge changes on the farm, huge financial changes on the farm, without knowing that they're going to have a contract at the end of the day, contract at the end of the year, or also sometimes these changes are pretty financially burdensome. And so we have to be able to empower the farmer financially to make these changes. So again, Danone's done the work to leverage our brands and pull up this pocketbook of money so that our farmers can access it. And that to me is easily the most exciting part of my job, is seeing these pieces come to fruition. So here are a couple nice projects out in Idaho, actually, where we have some movable cow shades. Again, when we talk carbon footprint, we're talking about it on a per pound of fat and protein corrected milk. So if that cow can eat the same amount of feed, but make a little bit more milk, make her more efficient, make her more comfortable, we have achieved the goal. We are working towards the goal. And so every time that these cows are out on pasture grazing and they're a little too hot because the sun's beating down on them, they're not going to make as much milk. And so we've taken a step back. Again, with these shades, we're taking that step forward and providing that kind of quality animal welfare that's absolutely proven to increase milk yield. Here's a nice picture actually of a branded Horizon Organic cow brush. Again, if you've never seen a cow use a cow brush, I'll encourage you to YouTube it. It is the funniest thing. It's like watching a dog when you scratch the top of their butt. It's the exact same thing. It is a riot. I'll keep moving here. This is a pretty interesting one. I know we talked about drought in the West. Dairy farms don't use a ton of water. Cows drink a lot of water, but we don't really use that much to actually produce milk. Now, that being said, we do use some. And so this is a pretty interesting project that one of our farmer partners in Idaho, that every day they flush where the cows stand when they're waiting to go into the parlor. So that's the picture on the right, nice clean floor. That's what it looks like after they flush. Now, again, Idaho, very water challenged. They would basically use a clever system here, this big white tank. They can actually pressurize it. So they recycle the water every day. And so instead of flushing only twice a day, they're actually flushing every 10 minutes. And so what they're doing is that water will exit the barn, they'll pressurize it, the solids go out to the manure lagoon, where it's eventually spread onto the field as fertilizer. And then the clean water is recycled back to be flushed through that area again, keeping the cows cleaner, keeping employees happier. Again, we talked about employee challenges. Agriculture is not unique from that. So a very cool project. And the end goal, they're estimating about 40,000 gallons of water saved a day, which is a huge number for just one farm. So that's, again, a very exciting project that we're happy to, partner with a farm and see it come to fruition. Got a couple other ones here. On the top left, we have an interseeder. Again, I'll try to simplify it a little bit. So when we plant a crop like corn, soon that canopy of the corn comes up, right? And the sunlight can't really reach underneath to the ground where another crop might be growing. What this machine allows us to do is once the corn has come up, put the seeds into the ground. And once the corn is chopped or cut or harvested in the fall, we're able to then get the sunlight on that seed we've already planted. And again, through the winter and into the spring, we'll have a cover crop on the field, keeping erosion at bay, maintaining nutrients in the field. Again, this is really the cutting edge piece. On the bottom left, we have a Compost Turner. It kind of looks like something out of Mad Max. This machine actually, when the manure comes out of the barn, it's separated, liquids go one way, solids go another way. This basically is, like the composting drum. I can almost look out the window and see mine here. This helps us compost our manure so that nutrients stay in the manure rather than cook off and are released in the atmosphere. Again, back to that carbon reduction. This is a great project, and we're seeing a lot of big farms go to it, and we're seeing a lot of small farms go to it as well. On the right, we actually have a farmer out in Utah working with us on some genomic projects. So again, if we can improve the overall performance of the cow, like I mentioned, we can actually drive better sustainability practices. And you can actually, what we can do is you can take a little notch out of the ear of a cow and run the DNA sequence of that cow. And so you can understand basically if she's a keeper or not. We're going to let her milk. We're going to make sure she has a long, fruitful life. But maybe we don't want to bring her offspring back as a dairy cow. And so what we're doing is essentially accelerating the rate at which we progress the genetic potential of a herd. And that's where we're seeing huge gains on farms that are buying into this as a management tool. I think last, but certainly not least, is all of this is all well and good, but we have to be able to tell the story of it, right? We have to be able to put this either with a QR code on the carton or on the website, a YouTube video, you name it. We have to be able to tell the consumer the good work that our farms and our business is doing. So here's actually, this is last week. These are pretty recent. A couple of farmers that are actually shooting a commercial and explaining the good practices that they're doing, how Danone's empowered them to either install the technologies or again, have a consistent milk check so that they're able to invest in their business in kind of this right way. So I'll kind of shut up for a second and stop sharing my screen and look to see if anybody has any questions.
There are a couple, Adam. Thanks. That was awesome. That I had not seen the movable shade component before. One question that I'm reading from the group here: doesn't the water saving tactic further concentrate the manure in the lagoon and cause more problems?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. So yes and no, and I don't mean to be glib in that response. It's an earnest one. So yes, it does concentrate the nutrients further, but again, that's where farms have nutrient management plans. So they actually measure, they take lab results of their manure and apply them to the field on specifically what nutrients the field needs. And that's a very scientific process that, again, our farmers know if you inundate the field, you'll reduce yield. And so they have to balance that scenario to produce a quality feed for the cows. Now, the smell piece, not necessarily. What smell is really driven by is kind of the nutrient load and how that nutrient load sits in the lagoon. And what we actually get is a fermentation in the lagoon that we don't want. And that's what actually drives methane release. And so if you can better stagnify or keep that lagoon inert, that's where we see the benefit. And again, when we have a more fluid product going in, we're actually able to get that product out across more fields further away from the farm, right? And that's really what drives it. At this particular farm, they're actually taking the solids out before it gets to the lagoon. And so the lagoon is, it's the majority of it is water, right? It's not good for anything but putting onto the fields, but the solids are really what they're being able to take further away. And again, prevent that fermentation in the lagoon, which prevents methane release. So I hope that helps. plant protein sources, talk about balancing animal and plant protein sources from the context of regen ag. Yeah, Rachel, I'd take a crack at it, and then maybe somebody else would love to shoot at it. I say you kind of saw from our brand portfolio, we're pretty agnostic. We work with quality farmers coast to coast that produce everything from oats, almonds, soy to dairy. And again, some of those products, byproducts, feed our cows. So really, it doesn't matter to us in terms of which product you buy. I think, again, market research has shown, and it was funny, we had a town hall yesterday with our CEO where he admitted in his fridge, he's got Horizon milk, he's got Silk soy milk, he's got International Delight coffee creamers. And I think that's kind of been the diet trend is folks have lots of different products in their fridge and are pretty, agnostic to kind of the type, as long as it agrees with them on a health basis.
I could talk a little bit about the other half of the question from a, listening and monitoring perspective of what people are talking about. Yeah, protein, we like to say, is kind of the macronutrient of the day. In past, nutritionists focused on, sugar, fat, carbohydrates, but now there's a big focus on protein. I'd have to say on the plant-based side, journalism seems to have a soft spot for every twist and turn that the plant-based world takes. I mean, it seems like whenever QSR puts one on the menu, or one of the bigger manufacturers, does a product variation, it gets a kind of an oversized share of coverage and discussion. But that is kind of what's leading nutritional and environmental conversations now. I have to say too, though, just major advancements on the cellular side, or the what is it? The mimicked meat side is making more and more strides. And I think as that stuff comes to scale, that will be a larger component of manufacturing.
I saw one question in the Q&A on how does Danone partner with startups or other players that have developed innovations that may be applied at the farm to support regenerative agriculture. I think our history is pretty deep in that area. We know we're not an agricultural company, and we know that we have to rely on quality agricultural companies to help us along in that process, whether it be from kind of the animal agriculture side of things. We've partnered with a company called Connectera. It's a pretty public relationship there on how do we use AI to better predict our cow's behavior and health events. So again, if you're able to keep a cow healthy, able to keep her productive, we know that reduces the carbon footprint on the overall system. Now, on the field and farming side, you can kind of have seen a couple of those pieces of machinery that, quite frankly, are cutting edge, and we're kind of allowing the companies that build these and the farmers that drive these and bring them into their operation kind of tell us. I think that's a big part of my role at Danone, is to allow our farmers to talk to each other and explain what's working at their farm and kind of share those ideas with other farmers. Again, I know I'm not the professional when it comes to this, and our farmers are. So kind of holding them up for their work and their knowledge is exactly what we get to do.
I have one more for Adam, quick, and I think we'll have to wrap up. Something you mentioned in one of the conversations we had prior to this, kind of the different sustainability attributes on different products within the Danone lineup, Horizon versus just the straight up Dannon yogurt brand. Can you talk a little bit about how you consider the different consumers in how you talk about farm practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak kind of generally about it. I think when it comes to the end consumer, there's quite a broad spectrum, right? We all understand that. I think the consistent Horizon Organic consumer really does care about how that milk is produced, that the farmers are taking care of their land, their people, their community, their cows. And that's wonderful, right? We get to hold that brand up for what it's kind of known for. Now, does a Dannon consumer, Dannon yogurt consumer, care about those same exact things and is willing to pay a premium for those same exact things? I think we'd all agree that that's probably not the case. So again, we might drive a different sustainability initiative under that brand versus the Horizon brand. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we're foregoing, any work with the farmers that produce a brand that you might not hear about the carbon footprint, we're again agnostic to it. It's going to be small farms, it's going to be big farms, it's going to be oats, it's going to be dairy. It really doesn't matter. We know we have to drive the change on the overall system to meet our kind of global corporate goals by 2030 and 2050.
Excellent. Yeah. Good explanation. I guess I'll turn it to Alan to wrap it up, but thanks everyone. And thanks especially Adam for bringing your story to life here. That was awesome.
Thank you very much.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Just terrific information. Really appreciate the time, and good to see you and another representative of the incredible Hardie family. Also, I want to thank the folks from Beta Rutter and Intel Distillery. Always insightful, terrific stuff. Thanks for keeping us all up to speed on what's happening in the industry. And here's to a great 2022. This is our last quarterly distillation for the year, but more to come. And as I mentioned, we will have Dennis Ryan, the lovely and talented, sharing some knowledge on an event later this week. So don't miss it. I'm putting the link in the chat so that everybody can come see how you build and protect a brand. And Dennis is a true expert in that space. So looking forward to hearing more from him then. With that, I thank you all again, and we will see you very soon. Thank you. Have a great day.